with our board members to better get to know them and to allow you to ask questions and get to know them as well. So jump on, you know, tune in and ask questions. And I'm very lucky today to be joined by Qwynn Galloway-Salazar, who is our newest student division chair. And I should say Dr. Galloway-Salazar as of last week. So welcome, Qwynn, and I'm so excited to have you here and to get to be able to talk to you some more.
Chris, thank you. Thank you for having me. This is super exciting. I am so thrilled and just honored and humbled to be a part of AAS and to be a part of the board and to be the student division chair.
Absolutely, and we're super lucky to have you. So, just in the couple of conversations that I've had with you so far, I am thrilled to see what you'll be able to accomplish. But I think before we get too far, let's just dive in a little bit and find out a little bit more about who you are, sort of how you got involved with suicide prevention, and how you got to where you are now, including like what happened, last week in the big deal. So.
Sure, sure. So first and foremost, I am a mom of an amazing bunch of six girls, three bonus daughters, and three daughters that I actually gave birth to. I'm a wife of a combat veteran who is currently serving in law enforcement. I'm also a veteran. I found my way to this work. I had a woman veteran mentor say to me a few months ago, those who wander aren't always lost. And that saying never really, it didn't resonate with me prior to that moment, but that moment, it kind of really resonated that for the past 20 years of my life, I have been working in some space as it relates to behavioral health and military and the veteran population. Um, so I joke and I say when I came off of active duty, I kicked my uniform off, Chris, and I said, I'm
Mhm.
never doing anything remotely related to serving the military again. And
But
here I am 20 years
right.
later, right? Literally almost 20 years later, still serving this population. Um, all jokes aside, I come to the space of suicide prevention, um, not willingly, so to speak. I feel like the field of suicide prevention chose me. In 2015, I was called to do a well-being check on a woman veteran, and upon getting to her home, um, we found out that she had attempted suicide. Um, and that was a defining moment for me, um, because at that moment, all of my work prior to, whether it was behavioral health or the work I've done in the criminal justice system, it all kind of collided. I was able to get law enforcement on scene that were crisis intervention trained. So CIT officers were able to come to her home, de-escalate the situation. Um, we got to the hospital, and there was an ER nurse that had been trained in a modality called STAR Behavioral Health, which is a cultural competence training provided for clinicians wanting to work with the military. And I helped pilot that in the state of Georgia. And so knowing that, getting that young veteran to care and on the road to her recovery included having law enforcement that were trained properly to engage her and having an ER system trained to engage her, and then being there with her upon her release and getting her the help that she needed with the Department of Veterans Affairs, which was also another organization, a federal agency that I worked for in the past. So all of those worlds kind of collided. Um, and what that experience did for me, Chris, was it caused me to really sit and look at the numbers of veterans that were attempting or dying by suicide on a daily basis. So I started delving into the research and started looking into what was happening across the nation, right? To really see how can I impact change. And a position opened up with SAMHSA's Service Member Veterans and Their Families Technical Assistance Center. And I jumped in, and we were supporting governors and mayors' challenges to prevent suicide amongst service member veterans and their families across the nation. And I jumped head into it to really make a mark, not just for me, but to make a mark for my peers, and to really help implement pilot programs and policies that would change, have a positive change for our military and veteran community. In a nutshell, that's what brought me to suicide prevention.
That's a wonderful nutshell, and I think that that sort of that journey, I think, really encapsulates a lot of the passion that we've talked about one on one, and I think a lot of people will resonate with that. Is that it's not necessarily something, if you're in this field, or if you're involved in advocacy and those kinds of things, it's not necessarily something that you choose. It's something that just kind of hits you at some point, regardless of what that is, right? And so then you run with it or you don't, and it sounds like you really ran with it.
Yeah, yeah, definitely, definitely. So much so that in the middle of the pandemic, I took on the new role as the co-director of the TA Center, um, which was a wild ride, but an amazing ride. You know, we had 35 states to 35 governors to sign on to the Governor's Challenge, to prevent suicide among service members, veterans, and their families, and just the collaboration across the
Yeah.
states, right, to impact change was resounding. Um, Unfortunately, at the end of July, I made the decision to one, I had to finish up my dissertation, had to get it done. I know you brought that up a little bit ago. And I also took on a new role as a caregiver, for my parents. And so I stepped away from the TA center, as a full time employee,
Hmm.
July 30th. And less than 2 weeks later, I get a message from AAS saying, "Hey, suicide prevention is knocking again."
Right.
um, and so truly, it's been a humbling experience, and to be able to continue to serve in this capacity it blows me away.
And
Humbling.
your dissertation turned out well, it sounds like. So
My dissertation did turn out well. Thank you. Thank you. Yes, it
so
did.
in that sort of realm too, I think it's important that we talk about your role here on the AAS board as student division chair. And I'm wondering, in terms of like a larger field sort of concept, and how that interacts with students in suicidology. What are some of your goals in your current position, and taking from what you know and what your experiences are, what do you want to accomplish?
My number one goal is to have students have a seat at the table, right? I think for so long, and it's not just the field of suicidology. I think it spans so many fields. Students are seen as just students, and they're in that learning mode. But I think there's so much that we can learn from students, and to allow their voices to be heard. Right? If I have to be the vessel, for the collective voice of students to be heard through AAS, I'm willing to be just that, because our students are our future. What our students are working on, whether it's undergraduate or graduate studies, really is going to impact our future. And it's also going to impact the way that we continue to save lives.
Yeah,
So
absolutely. And yeah.
it's definitely, as we're gearing up for AAS 22, it's more than just thinking about a conference, right? It's
Yeah.
how do we continue to develop our students along the continuum, along their journey to the point where they're early career professionals, is a huge piece for me that I want to ensure that we implement moving forward.
Yeah, having those student voices, being an integral part of what we do, and what the organization does. I mean, that's something that we've believed in for as long as I can remember. Um, we have a huge chunk of what we do at the conference and throughout the year going towards mentorship, right, for students across the spectrum of suicidology, and that really comes out at the conference, and we really we have new student orientation, or new member and student orientation, but places for students to sort of find mentors or work with people, or kind of network in ways that they might not in their academic settings. So as an organization, we really strive to put that forward, and I think having you as a leader in this sector, I think is going to be hugely helpful for a lot of people. So
Thank you.
having that goal is really important. I think it's going to be
Yeah,
really cool to see what you do with that.
I
Um,
appreciate that. Thank you.
it- yeah, and in terms of more generally, I think with AAS, are there things that you want to accomplish as a board member or as a member, or like what kind of projects are you thinking about? What kind of changes do you want to see in AAS?
So I'm learning, right? I'm learning. And I look across the board and I look at us all as different elements of making, different ingredients of making this amazing recipe, right? And I think about the hope and the optimism. And whenever I've had people say in the past, "When you bring so much hope." And when I think about hope, I often use the acronym HOPE for hearing other people's experiences. And that's where that optimism comes from, is by hearing other people's experiences. And I think that there are so many different moving parts and so many different amazing changes that are happening positively across AAS. But bringing that hope and reminding everyone about that why we came to this work. When we all were kids, there's a component of each one of us that are members and board members of AAS that wanted to change the world in some capacity. And we're all here in this one great space. And I often say, how do we keep that alive, right? I really want to be that optimistic voice of keeping the why we do this, why we choose to save lives with a sense of urgency. Why do we continue to do the research and work on evidence based practices to ensure that lives are saved? That's huge. That's huge. And I think my hope and my optimism is louder than the colors that I often am going to wear, um, because we're lifesavers. All of us are lifesavers. And to continue to be lifesavers, we have to be optimistic of the future and what's to come and envision what a world would look like with that level of optimism.
And yeah, no, that again, just clicks with some of the things that we've been talking about as an organization and working towards as an organization, and not just helping people create lives worth living, but creating a world in which they want to live.
Yeah.
We need to be helping people create that world, right? And not one that's tolerable or sufficient, but
Yeah.
it's one that they want to live in, that they're engaged with, that they
Yeah.
want to build from, right? So as like a starting point.
Absolutely. Absolutely. We're beacons of hope, all of us,
Yeah,
you know, and
yeah.
and I think it can be done.
And helping and helping people find their why. I mean, we could all be Simon Sinek in this scenario, and working towards that. But I think that's a really good. I think and we talked about this too. We both enjoy his work, but I think that's a really it's always a solid kind of viewpoint to come from. Is if you don't know why you're doing something, then you need to step back and you need to figure out what that is. I think it's a good moment to reassess and say, okay, is suicide prevention or this particular thing in suicide prevention what I need to be doing? And if it's not, then how else can I be helping? If this is what I want to be doing, if I know this is my personal mission and this is my passion, then you know go forward.
Full
But
charge, move forward.
um,
Absolutely.
and it sounds like that's exactly what you're doing and what you've done throughout your career. So I think again, this is just a great role to see you in. So um,
Thank you.
are there any things like in a larger sense for suicide prevention that you'd like to see change?
Um, I think change is a I think the word that I would rather um, address is focus on.
Yeah.
Um, you know, um, our worlds have shifted tremendously since 2020, tremendously. And I was recently on a call with a grief counselor, friend of mine in New York State, and she shared how much her clientele has risen. Um, how she's booked solid months in advance. A lot of the clients that she's currently seeing, of course, are family members of individuals who have died
Mhm.
of COVID. Um, and it caused me to kind of think of some of the other work that I've got going on and relate it back to this field of suicide prevention and how important it is for us to take our own charge and care for ourselves and think about how compassion fatigue and how secondary
Yeah.
trauma and vicarious trauma are really playing a strong role in the work that we do, especially as we're gearing up with crisis systems all over the country and 988 really having a strong message in terms of our suicidology professionals and our high trauma professionals the importance of caring for the caregiver.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's tough, right? I think once again, we all come to this field because we care. We have this great sense of empathy and we want to see people at their best. But we've got to also ensure that we're pouring into ourselves, right? We're all selfless in service, but we have to also be self more and care for ourselves. I think that's huge. We hear constantly that there is a need for more professionals in our field. Well, we have to also make sure that we're replenishing and we're taking care of the ones that we have in our field.
Yeah. If we expect greatness from folks, we need to be able to provide them with the resources that they can take care of themselves with. And this is something that I mean has been a struggle for a very long time.
Yeah.
Keeping folks from what you were talking about, compassion fatigue and getting burnout, especially in the crisis world. But I would imagine students deal with
Yeah.
a lot of those as well. I mean, when you're going
Yes.
through either internships or residencies or things like that, where um, you're brand new and you're working with people that you might not have chosen to work with if you had another sort of business plan or another sort of career goal. You're in an unfamiliar scenario and you're dealing with new things. I mean, a lot of it is reliant on your ability for resilience or compassion and all of those things, and
Right.
it can become really draining if you're not careful.
Mhm.
So
Absolutely, absolutely. The same model that we share in terms of connectedness is the same model. The peer connectedness is the same model that we can take on as professionals ourselves in this field of suicidology. Is having self-care buddies, creating those systems um, where we are, where we're able to bounce some of our most challenging situations with those that are in the field and do those check-ins to make sure that we're all one connected and we all are thriving together. I think that's important, and there's no better way than showing that practice works, than
yeah,
showing that practice works. um, and showing it with us, right? Showing it with us and allowing that sense of vulnerability um, to be shown, to say that sometimes it's okay to say that I'm not okay, and to have a self-care partner to tap on the shoulder and say, I'm not okay and I just need to talk. I just need to
yeah,
connect. I just need that human interaction to be heard and to know that I'm not alone. We
yeah.
tell our clients all the time, you're not alone. We've got to also remember, as those of us that are in this field and in this work, we're not alone.
And modeling that behavior is one way that we break down things like prejudice, discrimination,
Absolutely.
and stigma, and all of that. So I mean, that's certainly something that we have to pay attention to. Um,
Absolutely.
I'm very excited to have you on the board. I'm very much am looking forward to the things that you'll be doing with the students and with the board and suicidology in general. And I appreciate you jumping on this afternoon to chat with me and to
Yeah.
help folks get to know you a little bit better.
I appreciate this opportunity. This has been a great opportunity. I'm seeing some of the comments in
Yeah,
um, the comments that are coming in, and thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you. I see Jen is on here. We've got Pam Taylor. One thing that I'm going to ask the audience, and even if once this goes to be a pre-record, share some tips how you self-care, right? Let's spread that. Let's spread those tips and those best practices that you're using to self-care. I'll use one of my own. I am an avid diamond art, diamond arter. Um, so basically, diamond art is similar to paint by number, and going around my house, you will find so many different portraits that I've worked on doing diamond art. It has been such a great way to relieve stress. It's great for anxiety, for those moments where I just feel like I just need a moment alone. I have a diamond art table on the other side of my desk that's specifically for art. Um, and it has worked miracles for me. Um, because there have been those moments, Chris, where, just as we talked about, where that fatigue has come in. Um, Hearing stories of combat for years on end does have a wear and tear. At some point, it wears and tears. And so I always try to make sure I have an outlet. Um, as a spouse of a law enforcement officer and a combat veteran, a lot of the stories that I have, I can't share with my partner because I don't ever want some of those things to be triggers to him. Um, and so I definitely keep a strong support system around me to be able to catch me in those moments, but to also be able to notice some of the warning signs when I'm not okay. And I think it's okay to share when you're not okay, and what are some of those things to look for um, when you're not okay. So I definitely, once again, coming on board to AAS and just the power of connection and collaborating and storytelling. There's so many stories throughout AAS that need to be told, whether it's from the lived experience, and families and researchers and students. There's just so much good that's going to happen. And I look forward to sharing. I look forward to gleaning. I look forward to gleaning from our students, right? I really do, because they're going to teach us a lot. They're going to teach us things, and impacts that are going to lead this field in ways that we never imagined, because they have so many resources at their fingertips that we didn't have coming up. So I look forward to cheerleading for them. um, our board, amazing board. I think I'm the baby on the board, and I'm thrilled to be on a board with trailblazers that are leading the way, that are teaching me things every single day. And Chris, that's what it's about. At the end of the day, that's truly what it's about: is what can we learn to leave a lasting impact on
yeah.
generations to come.
I
So
appreciate you starting the trend, if you will, of sharing self-care stuff. I mean, I think it's really important to look at individuality in a couple of different ways when it comes to suicide prevention, and self-care is definitely one of those things. And that, you know, self-care is a very personal thing. It's a very individual thing. Um, it can overlap with other folks' stuff, but like, just saying like, oh, running or just hiking or something like that, it may not connect with other people. So you have to find something that really means something for you, and provides you with that sort of refilling your cup, if you will, of your energy and your mental capacity and all of that. So I appreciate you sharing that. And yeah, everybody else who wants to jump on and share those, we'll make sure to continue
Yeah. Please. And
look
Chris,
at
I'm going to
those.
throw it at you before we end. What do you do for self-care?
Well, I just gave mine up in my hypotheticals. I'll go run or I'll go hike. I'll do that kind of stuff. I think playing with my kids or talking to my kids is another one. If I'm really down, my oldest is at a point where I can just text him and just be like, "Hey man, I hope you're having a good afternoon," and we'll go back and forth and talk about computer stuff because that's what he's into right now. So, but yeah, so
Nice.
that's sort of those are the things that kind of take the
Good.
edge off for me. Yeah.
Good. That's
Yep.
awesome. That's yeah, it's amazing how our kids can be that sometimes.
Yep.
I have my middle daughter is that way. She is the total empath, like total. She's 11,
Oh
and I'm
yeah.
like, the things that you know at 11, it absolutely amazes me. And she's that. There's moments of my day where I see good news about lives being saved, and I may cry, right? I cry.
Hmm.
I'm not gonna say I may cry. I cry. And she's always there to remind me that there is good in that, right? And what we teach our kids, and we're building those foundations um, in them to be empaths and caregivers that we are. That's our legacy. We leave a little bit of that in our legacy. So
Yep.
I say keep sharing with your son, Chris. Keep sharing with your son.
Oh yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I think we all need to do that a little bit more and be open
Yes.
and expect them, not expect too much from them, especially right now in the last couple of years. I saw something the other day, and this is sort of on topic. I saw something the other day that showed like the last normal year that kids had, given what grade they're currently in, right? So if they are in fourth grade, the last normal year that they had was first grade.
That's great.
And so just looking at some of those things, it's really intense. And so right now being open with them, and I think talking with your the youth, I guess, in general, the way that you would normally about some of these things, I think is really empowering for them, and letting them know that it's not abnormal to talk about how you're doing or how you're feeling. I think that can even translate over into a lot of, remembering back in my undergrad years, um, you know, how different that would have been had mental health or suicide prevention been more talked about and more openly addressed and resources more available. It's getting better on some campuses. I think a lot of folks are doing some work, really good work there. Um, but it's something that we know, from personal experience, that it's not quite where it needs to be yet.
Right.
Normalization, is going to make a big difference, I think.
It's going to make a big difference. I agree. And it takes folks like all of us to help normalize that. And for us to show vulnerability and to say, for some of us, we've been there too. And recovery is possible and all things are possible. And, being able to share your experience helps empower someone else.
Yep, absolutely. I think that's a great line to end on. If you're good with that.
I'm good with
All
that.
right.
I'm good with that.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Qwynn, for jumping on, and thank you for everybody who jumped on and watched. If you catch this afterward, like we said, leave questions, leave self-care tips, whatever you do for your own self-care, and we'll make sure to keep checking those out. But thanks again, Qwynn, for jumping on this afternoon. It's been
Yes,
great.
it's been wonderful. Thank you so